June 1940. Washington, D.C. Rain lashes against the marble columns of the War Department. Inside, the atmosphere is heavier than the storm outside. On the polished oak table lies a telegram from Europe terse, devastating. Paris has fallen. French forces capitulated to Germany. The men seated around the table stare in silence. Maps of Europe are covered in red arrows, the Nazi war machine pushing relentlessly westward. To the military brass in Washington, one truth now stands out with painful clarity. America is unprepared. Major General George C. Marshall removes his glasses, rubbing his temples. "Gentlemen," he says, voice low but urgent, "we have 458 tanks. Most of them obsolete. Germany has over 10,000. No one speaks. The rain pounds harder against the window. Across the Atlantic, German panzer divisions, sleek, fast, terrifyingly efficient, are rewriting the rules of warfare. They cut through France in 6 weeks using a new doctrine the world now calls blitzkrieg, lightning war. In contrast, America's army is still practicing cavalry drills with horses." General Leslie McNair finally breaks the silence. "We don't just need tanks," he says grimly. "We need a way to build them faster than anyone has ever imagined." That same summer, over 500 miles northwest, a 1-year-old man stands inside a cavernous General Motors plant in Detroit, Michigan. His name is William S. Knudsen, and he's staring at the humming lines of automobile assembly, rows of Buicks and Chevrolets gliding along conveyor belts, men with pneumatic tools tightening bolts in rhythmic precision. Knudsen, Danish-born and self-made, is no soldier, but he understands something the generals do not. War is not just fought with guns, it's won with factories. He knows every gear, every mold, every stamping machine in the auto industry. He has spent his life turning raw steel into millions of cars, perfecting an art that America has taken for granted, mass production. And now, President Franklin D. Roosevelt needs him to do the impossible. In July 1940, a black car pulls up to the White House. Inside the Oval Office, Roosevelt greets Knudsen with his familiar half-smile. "Bill," he says, "we're not at war yet, but we will be. And when that day comes, I'll need America to build not cars, but weapons." Knudsen nods, his heavy frame leaning forward. "You'll need an army of machines, Mr. President." Roosevelt smiles. "And I hear you know how to build armies." In that moment, the President of the United States places one of the greatest bets of the 20th century, not on a general, but on a factory man. Knudsen accepts, leaving behind his $300,000 a year GM salary to work for the US government at $1 a year. His mission: mobilize the entire American manufacturing base for total war. No one yet knows it, but this quiet, pragmatic engineer will soon command a force greater than any division in Europe, the arsenal of democracy. Within weeks, Knudsen moves into his new headquarters at the Office of Production Management. The scale of the task hits him like a freight train. He visits army procurement officers and nearly laughs at what he sees: hand-drawn blueprints, contracts written in triplicate, and outdated procurement laws that make buying a single wrench take months. "How are you supposed to build tanks when you can't even order the bolts?" he mutters. He realizes America's industrial muscle is massive, but fragmented. Ford, Chrysler, GM, Packard, Boeing, and hundreds of smaller firms all operate like competing kingdoms. To fight a modern war, Knudsen must do what no one has ever done: unify industry, government, and labor under one goal: production. He starts calling factory owners, old friends, and rivals alike. His message is simple: "Gentlemen, the time for competition is over. You're not building for profit anymore, you're building for survival." By December 1940, as Europe burns, Knudsen takes his first tour of the Rock Island Arsenal, one of America's oldest military facilities. The sight shocks him: rows of aging machinery, outdated lathes, and men still forging tank parts by hand. Production output: barely 1 tank a day. Knudsen turns to the plant manager. "We need 1,000 a month." The man laughs nervously. "Impossible." Knudsen doesn't flinch. So was building a car every minute. That night, he writes a memo to Washington. "If you want tanks, give them to Detroit. The auto industry can make anything once we teach it what a tank looks like." The generals are skeptical. To them, Detroit builds toys, not weapons. But Roosevelt approves the plan. And with that, Detroit becomes the battlefield. January 1941, the first orders go out. Knudsen summons executives from the big three automakers Henry Ford, Chrysler's K.T. Keller, and GM's Charles Wilson to a closed-door meeting. He lays out blueprints for tanks, trucks, and aircraft engines across a long oak table. These, he says, tapping the plans, are your new cars. Henry Ford scowls. You want me to build weapons? Tanks aren't cars, Knudsen. Knudsen meets his glare. No, Henry, but they could be if you think like an engineer instead of a farmer. Ford's jaw tightens, but Knudsen presses on. Your assembly lines can make a V8 engine in 20 minutes. You can stamp a fender in seconds. Why not a tank plate? Why not a turret? For a moment, the room is silent. Then Wilson from GM nods. He's right, he says quietly. We've done harder things. Knudsen smiles. Then let's build the impossible. In March 1941, construction begins on an empty field outside Detroit, a project so vast that workers nickname it Knudsen's Folly. It will soon become the Detroit Arsenal Tank Plant, the largest tank factory in the world. Knudsen personally oversees every inch of it. He demands precision down to the bolts. No hand-fitting, he insists. Everything must fit the first time like cars. To the old army engineers, it's heresy. Tanks had always been handcrafted, each one slightly different, built by machinists with wrenches and files. Knudsen replaces them with presses, dies, and conveyor belts. For the first time in history, tanks will roll off an assembly line. The skeptics laugh. The press calls it Knudsen's dream. But when the first test chassis rolls down the line in August 1941, the laughter stops. It's not perfect, it's noisy, rough-edged, but it's fast. And it works. Knudsen grins. We'll make 1,000 of these, he says. Then 10,000. On December 7th, 1941, the news comes that changes everything. Pearl Harbor. Japan's attack drags America into the war overnight. Roosevelt's words echo across the nation. We shall build ships, planes, tanks, and guns at a rate unprecedented in history. Knudsen now holds the weight of that promise. Factories roar to life across the Midwest. Ford converts the Willow Run plant to build bombers. Chrysler begins producing tank engines. General Motors fabricates gun mounts and turrets. Every assembly line in America beats like one-heart pistons of democracy, forging steel for freedom. But Knudsen knows the real test is still ahead. The army wants a new tank faster, stronger, easier to produce, the machine that will fight Hitler's panzers in Europe. Its name, the M4 Sherman. And to make it in time, Knudsen will have to do something even more radical. He's going to turn scrap metal into an army. January 1942. Detroit, Michigan. Snow blankets the skeletal frame of a half-finished factory, the size of 10 football fields. Steel beams vanish into the grey morning mist. The ground shakes as another crane swings a girder into place. At the site's center, surrounded by mud and scaffolding, William Knudsen stands wrapped in a wool coat, his breath turning to vapor in the freezing air. He watches as men, tens of thousands of them, swarm across the construction site. Welders, riveters, electricians, machinists. Many have never seen a tank before. To them, this isn't a battlefield. It's a job. But to Knudsen, this is the front line. He shouts over the noise to the foreman. Keep the lines moving. No delays, this plant's got to be building Shermans before summer. The foreman nods, his voice barely audible above the thunder of hammers. Yes, sir, we'll make it happen. When the first shifts clock in, Detroit Arsenal Tank Plant feels like an anthill of motion and purpose. Thousands of workers, men, women, even teenagers, pour in through the gates. For many, this is their first job in months. The Great Depression is finally fading under the shadow of war. Inside, enormous presses shape steel into armor plates thicker than a man's arm. Sparks fly in golden arcs, raining down on the concrete floor. The smell of oil, metal, and sweat fills the air. The plant operates 24 hours a day, 3 shifts without pause. Floodlights turn night into day. In one corner, Inspectors in white coats check precision gauges. In another, mechanics fit the heavy Continental R975 engines into steel hulls. Every motion has rhythm, a mechanical ballet, choreographed by Knudsen's mind. He's turned chaos into choreography. But the early days are brutal. Tanks break down on the line, workers argue with engineers. Machinery designed for car fenders groans under the weight of tank armor. A foreman storms into Knudsen's office one night, grease still on his hands. "Bill, these bolts are stripping out. The plates are too heavy for our presses. We can't make these tanks like Buicks." Knudsen looks up from his blueprints, calm but firm. "Then we change the presses, not the tanks." He sketches an idea on the nearest scrap of paper. Thicker bolts, deeper threading, reinforced dies. "Make the machines fit the war," he says, not the other way around. The next morning, mechanics begin retooling the equipment. Within days, production picks up again. In Washington, bureaucrats can't believe what they're seeing. The War Department receives the first report from Detroit. 30 M4 Shermans produced in 10 days. It doesn't sound like much until they realize that's 10 times faster than traditional hand assembly. Knudsen knows they're only getting started. He tours the line daily, clipboard in hand, shirt sleeves rolled up. Workers cheer when he passes. They call him Big Bill. He eats in the same cafeteria, drinks the same coffee, shares the same exhaustion. He's not just an executive now, he's a commander. In March 1942, the first M4 Sherman tank rolls off the line, its olive-drab armor gleaming under fluorescent lights. On its hull, painted in white block letters, is a name chosen by the workers, the Spirit of Detroit. When it rumbles out of the factory yard for its first field test, hundreds of workers gather to watch. Some wave flags, others wipe tears from their eyes. The engine roars to life, and the tank lurches forward, treads grinding the frozen earth. Knudsen watches it go with a faint smile. "She's not just a machine," he murmurs. "She's a promise. That promise will soon be tested." As 1942 wears on, Allied forces are fighting desperately across the globe, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of the Pacific. The M4 Sherman is about to become their lifeline. Knudsen receives a telegram from General Marshall's office. Army requires 50,000 tanks by end of 1943, all variants. Confirm feasibility. He reads it twice, then exhales slowly. 50,000. He calls an emergency meeting with his top production chiefs. The room smells of stale coffee and urgency. "Gentlemen," he begins, "the Army wants 50,000 tanks. That's not a request, that's a deadline." Someone in the back mutters, "That's insane." Knudsen doesn't argue. He just looks around the room. "Then let's be insane." To meet the impossible goal, he launches a nationwide effort, a war production orchestra. Ford builds subassemblies in Dearborn. Chrysler forges engine blocks. General Motors produces transmissions and drivetrains. Smaller factories in Cleveland, Toledo, and Chicago handle track links, periscopes, and gun sights. Everything moves in rhythm, synchronized by one unbreakable law. Knudsen has drilled into every plant manager. No idle hands, no idle machines. He creates a system where tanks are built like puzzles, every piece made somewhere different, then brought together to fit with mathematical precision. Detroit becomes the epicenter, but soon Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and St. Louis are part of the machine. The hum of lathes and presses becomes the sound of America's heartbeat. By late 1942, tanks are rolling off assembly lines every 40 minutes. Yet, for all his success, Knudsen faces a new kind of enemy doubt. Critics claim the Sherman is too light, too tall, too easy to destroy. Tin can, some soldiers call it. Knudsen listens, but doesn't waver. Quantity is quality, he insists. A tank you can build 10 times faster is 10 times deadlier in the long run. He understands what few others do, that the war will be won not by the strongest tank, but by the one you can replace. As he later tells a visiting congressman, "If we can outbuild them, we can outlast them." By the end of 1942, Detroit's transformation is total. Skylines glow red at night from the blast furnaces. The streets are lined with convoys of flatbeds carrying Sherman hulls under tarps. Restaurants stay open past midnight to feed the third shift. For the first time, The American home front feels like a front line. Knudsen works 18-hour days, sleeping in his office. His secretary once finds him at dawn, slumped over a pile of memos, a coffee cup still warm beside his hand. She covers him with his coat and whispers, "You're building an army, Bill." And indeed, he is one made not of flesh and blood, but of steel, sweat, and faith. By December 1942, the Detroit Arsenal tank plant breaks every record known to war industry. Over 1,000 tanks a month. A 90% reduction in build time. Thousands of workers, many women trained in weeks to operate machines once reserved for specialists. America now has what Roosevelt had promised, an arsenal of democracy. Knudsen stands on the observation deck above the factory floor one evening, watching a fresh line of M4 Shermans rumble out toward the rail yard. He can see his reflection in the glass older, more tired, but proud. Each tank glints under the factory lights like a metallic sunrise. He turns to his deputy. "You know," he says softly, "these aren't tanks, they're freedom on tracks. And soon, those tanks forged from the sweat of Detroit will roll across the deserts of North Africa, where General Patton will put them to the test against Hitler's panzers." Knudsen's crazy idea is about to face its moment of truth. February 1943. El Guetta, Tunisia. The desert is quiet, too quiet. A yellow haze hangs over the barren ridges, the morning sun baking the sand until it glitters like powdered glass. In the distance, faint rumbling echoes across the valley. Engines, dozens of them. Through his binoculars, General George S. Patton studies the horizon from the hatch of his command jeep. His polished helmet gleams, the trademark ivory-handled revolvers glinting at his sides. Beside him stands Colonel Benson, squinting into the glare. "German armor," he mutters. "Looks like Mark IVs, maybe even Tigers." Patton lowers the binoculars, his jaw tightening. Then this is where we find out if Knudsen's tin cans can fight. He's referring, of course, to the new American tank that has just arrived on the front, the M4 Sherman. Only months earlier, these tanks had been nothing but blueprints and factory dreams in Detroit. Now, hundreds of them are lined up along the ridges of North Africa, olive-drab hulls glinting beneath the merciless sun, their white stars stark against the sand. Inside one of them, Sergeant Frank Hennings, 22 years old from Cleveland, runs his hand over the control levers. The air inside the Sherman is stifling nearly 120 degrees and smells of oil, gunpowder, and fear. "Feels like a damn furnace," the loader mutters. Hennings grins. "Better a furnace than a coffin. Let's show the Krauts what Detroit built." The radio crackles. All units prepare to engage. Enemy armor advancing. Godspeed, boys. The engines roar to life, filling the valley with thunder. One by one, the Shermans lurch forward, treads grinding through the sand. The battle for El Guetta, the first major clash between American and German armor, has begun. Across the valley, German commander Hans-Georg von Luck peers through his field glasses, unimpressed. His Tigers and Panzer IVs are the pride of the Afrika Korps, heavy, thick-skinned, and deadly accurate. He smirks as he watches the American tanks advance in clumsy formation. "So these are the Yankees' toys," he says to his aide. "Let's teach them how real tanks fight." Moments later, the German guns open fire. The desert erupts. The first 88mm shell screams across the valley, punching through a Sherman's armor like butter. The tank explodes, sending a fireball skyward. Another Sherman takes a hit and shudders to a stop, smoke pouring from its turret. For a moment, the line wavers. But then, something remarkable happens. The surviving Shermans don't retreat, they charge. Dozens of them surge forward in unison, closing the range, their own 75mm guns blazing. The air fills with the hammering of machine guns and the concussive thump of cannon fire. A Tiger's armor shrugs off a few hits, then a Sherman flanks it, striking from the side. The round punches through, detonating the ammunition inside. The Tiger explodes, its turret blown skyward. Patton watches from the ridge, eyes wide. "They're learning," he mutters. "They're goddamn learning." By dusk, the battlefield is littered with burning hulks, American and German alike. But the line has held. Against all expectations, the Shermans, fast, reliable, and easily repaired, have outlasted the German assault. When Patton rides down to the valley floor that evening, he passes crews working by flashlight, welding damaged tanks back into fighting shape. One young corporal wipes soot from his face and salutes. "Sir, we'll have her running again by morning." Patton nods, voice low. "That's what wins wars, son. Not armor, not guns, guts and wrenches." He climbs onto a tank and runs his gloved hand along its scarred hull. "Thank you, Mr. Knudsen," he whispers. Back in Detroit, Knudsen reads the after-action report from North Africa. Sherman performance satisfactory, mechanical reliability exceptional, crews report confidence in vehicle, tank easy to service in field. He allows himself the faintest smile. The impossible dream has survived its trial by fire, but he also knows the war and his work are far from over. The army now wants more. Faster production, improved armor, longer guns. Every week brings new designs, the M4A2, the M4A3, the Firefly variant for the British. Knudsen adjusts his glasses, muttering, "If the battlefield changes, the factory will change with it." The arsenal expands. By mid-1943, America's industrial base has become the most powerful the world has ever seen. The numbers are staggering. 48,000 tanks built in a single year, 86,000 fighter planes, 2.6 million trucks. Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago together outproduce all of Nazi Germany. In the Rouge River complex, Ford's Willow Run plant, originally meant for cars, now assembles B-24 Liberators every 63 minutes. At Chrysler's Warren plant, one Sherman tank rolls off the line every 38 minutes. The workers, men and women alike, begin to take pride in what they call the Detroit front. "Every rivet we hammer," one welder says, "is another bullet for the boys overseas." Sherman's on every front. By 1944, Knudsen's tanks are everywhere. In Italy, they rumble through the ruins of Cassino. In Normandy, they climb the cliffs behind Omaha Beach, the sound of their treads mingling with the cries of liberation. In the Pacific, they churn through jungle mud on Saipan and Iwo Jima. A single tank design, born from a handful of engineers and a city of auto workers, now fights across half the planet. Each Sherman carries a story. Some are named Detroit Dream, others Rosie's Revenge or Freedom Express. On their hulls, chalked in bold letters by their crews, are the names of girlfriends, wives, hometowns, small reminders of what they're fighting for. The human engine. Knudsen receives letters from soldiers, grease-stained notes written from the front. One reads, "Dear Mr. Knudsen, we fixed our Sherman in the field after it took 2 hits. Your design saved our lives. We thought you should know. Sergeant R. Carney, 3rd Armored Division." He keeps the letter pinned to his office wall. When visitors ask about it, he simply says, "That's why we build them." To Knudsen, every tank is a human story cast in steel. Turning point, 1944. By the time of Operation Overlord, Knudsen's army of machines has become unstoppable. At Normandy, the beaches tremble under the weight of Sherman after Sherman unloading from landing craft. The Allied invasion fleet, powered by thousands of engines forged in Detroit, becomes a living monument to industrial might. One British general remarks, "The German soldier fights for his life. The American fights with an endless supply of machines." He's not wrong. In the hedgerows of France, Shermans clash with panthers and tigers once more. The German tanks are deadlier, but they're few. When one is destroyed, it's irreplaceable. When a Sherman burns, another takes its place by sunrise. Knudsen's philosophy, quantity is quality, has become the foundation of Allied strategy itself. As the Allies push toward Germany, Patton radios his headquarters in late 1944. "The Shermans are holding. Tell Knudsen he's fighting this war as much as we are." In that single line, he captures what few realize at the time, that the outcome of World War II isn't decided just on the battlefield, but on the factory floor. The personal cost. By now, Knudsen is exhausted. Years of 18-hour days have taken their toll. His hair has gone white. His hands shake when he signs reports. But when asked if he'd do it again, he answers without hesitation, "Every damn minute." He visits the Detroit Arsenal one last time in late 1944. The workers stop what they're doing as he walks the length of the factory floor. Tank after tank rolls past him on conveyor belts nearly perfect, gleaming, identical. He rests his hand on one and whispers, "You'll do fine, boys. You'll do fine." He knows these machines will soon rumble across the Rhine, and in a sense, so will he. By the end of 1944, American production has surpassed all Axis powers combined. The arsenal Knudsen built now spans an entire continent. It's not just factories anymore, it's shipyards, foundries, mines, and rail lines, all synchronized to one unbreakable rhythm: victory. The engineer who once turned scrap into automobiles has now turned an entire nation into a weapon. And as Europe trembles under the weight of American armor, even the enemy begins to understand the scope of what he's unleashed. March 1945, Western Germany. Snow falls softly on the shattered streets of Remagen. In the distance, a battered stone bridge stretches across the Rhine, the last intact crossing into the heart of Nazi Germany. From the fog emerges a low rumble, deep and rhythmic, like thunder rolling through the earth. Dozens of M4 Shermans grind forward through the snow, their treads clanking, exhausts spitting steam. The white stars on their hulls are barely visible under the grime of war. At their head rides a tank nicknamed Detroit Thunder. The crew inside, mud-streaked, exhausted, eyes red from sleepless nights, are among the first Americans to cross the Rhine. Their radio crackles with static, and a voice calls out, "Keep moving, boys. Berlin's just over the river." The driver, Private McKenna, presses his foot down, feeling the steel beast surge beneath him. He doesn't know the name William Knudsen. He's never seen Detroit. But the machine he's driving, the one carrying him into history, bears the fingerprints of that man's mind. Knudsen's legacy in motion. As 1945 unfolds, the scale of Knudsen's miracle becomes undeniable. Across the Atlantic, American tanks, trucks, and planes fill every road, every sky, every battlefield. Entire divisions move with mechanical precision, supplied by a vast industrial web stretching from the Great Lakes to the Pacific coast. A report from the War Department lists the numbers almost in disbelief. 86,000 tanks produced. 297,000 aircraft. 2.4 million trucks. 6 million rifles. 41 billion rounds of ammunition. The factories that once built Buicks and Chryslers now produce the hardware of freedom. The hum of engines and stamping presses has replaced the sound of silence that once haunted Depression-era America. And at the center of it all stands William Knudsen, the man who turned a nation of mechanics and dreamers into an unstoppable war machine. The enemy takes notice. Captured German officers, interrogated after the fall of Aachen, speak with stunned awe about what they have seen. One colonel says, "Every time we destroyed 10 of your tanks, 20 more appeared. Every road, every horizon, more American machines. It was like fighting the ocean." Another adds quietly, "We never lost to your soldiers. We lost to your factories." Even the meticulous German records, seized after the war, reveal a growing despair. By late 1944, Hitler's own generals were writing, "The industrial capacity of the United States is beyond calculation. We cannot destroy their production faster than they replace it." Knudsen's name is never mentioned in those reports, but his work is everywhere, in every shattered panzer and every broken bridge the Shermans crossed. Women of steel. Knudsen never fought alone. By 1943, nearly 1/3 of the industrial workforce was female. Women who once kept homes now rivet armor, weld seams, and operate precision lathes. They call themselves Rosies, after a newspaper headline that reads, "Rosie the Riveter keeps the army rolling." At the Detroit Arsenal, 10,000 women work side by side with men, their coveralls smeared with oil and grit. One, named Eleanor Rupp, welds tank treads for 12 hours a day. When a reporter asks her why she does it, she wipes the sweat from her brow and says, "Because my brother's somewhere in one of these. If I make it right, maybe he comes home." Knudsen visits the line often, walking among them, shaking hands, thanking each worker personally. He knows they are the backbone of his army. Every tank you build, he tells them, is one step closer to peace. A nation in motion. By 1945, Detroit is no longer just a city, it's a living organism. Its rail lines run non-stop, carrying engines east and armor west. Convoys of trucks roar down Michigan Avenue, hauling tank treads and artillery shells. The air smells of oil, smoke, and hot steel. Posters line the streets. This is our battlefront, the factory floor. Children collect scrap metal for the war effort. Housewives save bacon grease for explosives. Mechanics work double shifts, sleeping under their benches. Every American feels part of something vast, something that stretches from the smallest garage to the skies over Berlin. And though few know his name, William Knudsen is the architect of it all. Victory through production. May 1945. Germany surrenders. In cities across America, church bells ring, factory sirens wail, and workers pour into the streets, waving flags and weeping. At the Detroit Arsenal, tanks sit silent on the line, their engines still warm from the last run. Someone hangs a sign above the assembly floor. The Arsenal of Democracy, job done. Knudsen visits that day, walking slowly between the rows of machines. His steps echo in the vast, now quiet space. He reaches out and touches the last completed Sherman, its olive drab paint, still tacky. He turns to his foreman. "You know," he says softly, 3 years ago, this was just dirt and dreams." The man nods. "And now it's history." Knudsen smiles faintly. "No, now it's peace." After the guns fall silent, in the post-war years, historians will call it the greatest industrial feat in human history, the moment when a democratic nation outproduced every tyranny on earth. Knudsen himself will fade quietly into retirement. He refuses awards, avoids interviews, and insists that credit belongs to the workers. When President Truman later awards him the Medal for Merit, the nation's highest civilian honor, Knudsen accepts it with characteristic humility. "I was just a foreman," he says. "The real heroes built the machines." He returns to Detroit only once more, years later. The factory is quieter now, converted back to peacetime production. He runs a hand along the cold steel of a stamping press and murmurs, "You've done enough, old girl." Then he turns, limping slightly, and walks away. The legacy of the machine. Today, the Detroit Arsenal tank plant still stands a monument of glass and concrete, its silhouette as formidable as the machines it birthed. The numbers endure. 22,000 tanks built in a single facility, 30,000 workers at peak. One idea that changed the course of history. Every Sherman that fought in North Africa, Italy, France, and the Pacific carried more than steel and rivets. It carried the spirit of an entire people and the vision of one engineer who refused to accept the word impossible. In the quiet of the museum, where one of those tanks now rests, a small plaque bears his name. William S. Knudsen, the man who built the arsenal of democracy. Below it, a quote from one of his wartime speeches. "You can't fight tanks with speeches. You fight them with machines and the will to build them." The camera pans slowly across the Sherman's hull, the light catching the worn edges of its armor. Outside, the hum of a modern Detroit still echoes faintly, a city forever defined by the man who turned scrap metal into an army.